Alright, a couple things. Gary made a response to a video of mine. It was called Beyond Bad and Stupid Volume 3. That was his response. His name. My video was that Nietzsche wasn't a nihilist. But then I talked about Darwin in it because that's what he was talking about. I think we're talking about Darwinistic related issues. But whatever, we could separate them or do them together. The title was more because after reading his title about Nietzsche and nihilism, I wanted to say he's not a nihilist. And that's what you guys are going to have to get. We're not saying there's no values. The problem is not that there are no values. The problem is there's too many values. And there's not an absolute way to determine one over the other. Yeah, Gary can come up with simple excuses. But first of all, life isn't made of just simple examples. Excuse me, simple examples. And two, even those simple examples are easily complicated. Okay, now one thing I wanted to say, I was thinking of making it a separate video, but back on the DE and stuff, and I had mentioned that, some people have kids trying to thinking they're going to make the world a better place. I did that. So you can fuck yourself if you think people can't think that. Now, it was crazy. It was a crazy idea. I did it with a crazy person, not a stable person, but I've seen stable people do it together, and it worked. And it is possible, and even in my case, so it was crazy and it couldn't work, so I was wrong. And you could even say there's some selfish ideas or egomania, and that it was wrong to take that risk. But don't tell me that I didn't think my kids would make the world a better place. I did. I did not feel they would glorify me. And frankly, had I made it more traditional and tried to glorify myself, maybe I would have had better control of the situation with that old school approach than just creating free spirits. But I think more free spirits in the world would make it a better place, and there's complications. The world isn't very friendly to free spirits. And if there's other problems especially, that's not enough. But it is possible to want to make the better place by putting better people into it and thinking, you know what, I can love and teach these people, and they won't be the bastards that are, invade other countries or vote for people to do that. Okay, I have a bunch of comments on Gary's 40-minute video. There's probably a comment in here somewhere, but one thing is Gary complains because I said, hey, I'm 15 seconds in, I'm adding a comment, and then I add comments. Gary, you read my comment that you have not read before, stop in the middle of it, and then interject your stuff. Now, I know sometimes you've watched the videos before, but sometimes you haven't, and you just are interjecting stuff. So shut up about interjecting. Yeah, it's better to get ideas off your mind than to save them and not be listening the second 2/3 of the video because you're trying to remember what you wanted to say. It's better just to get that out there and reprocess the new information. So, I used to leave long, more complicated comments, and at times I'd even wait to the end. None of that. You never liked any of that. You don't like it if you're not being agreed with. So stop giving me fucking advice when all you really want is to be agreed with. Don't tell me how best to disagree with you. You have no idea how best to do that because you don't believe in people should disagree with you. But anyway, comments. Okay, you were talking a lot about Nietzsche and nihilism, and you complained that I didn't say, why he wasn't nihilist. He wasn't nihilist because he endorsed people having values, making values. There was no life. To be nihilist was anti-life, and if there's one thing he was, is pro-life, try to live. On the other hand, he would like a guy like Napoleon, so yeah, we could call him an asshole, because Napoleon went for it. And that's basically all he has going for him, and that's good enough. It's not good enough for me, it was good enough for Nietzsche. So I don't have to endorse Nietzsche. Yeah, there's indefensible things, doesn't matter. You come through these ideas that create a reason for you to have an answer, and that's what's important. And I think those are the best philosophers, where it's the ideas you have while reading it that you're supposed to pay attention to, not trying to figure out whether you endorse or not this other person. But then you bring it to the next level where you're just going to take a bunch of people who have said crazy things about Nietzsche over the years and you're just going to buy it lock, stock, and barrel. You're not going to let it be explained to you what he means. You're going to be confused because he's going to call Plato noble and he's going to say Christianity's this and overcoming, but on the other hand it sucks, and because this, and you're not going to follow it or let anybody help you follow it. But it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter, and yet if you're going to make a point of it, Nietzsche was not a nihilist. The issue is that your one values are not just perfect. And how do you decide between them? And you come up with all kinds of examples that I think I'll save to get into, because there's like 40 fucking comments on 40 minutes worth of videos. There's 30 comments I've made. I have notes I've made on my own site. Pause, make a note. So you don't have to see it till I'm done. This is very useful to you, getting agreed with. Okay. I think a lot of you, maybe including To Be Serious, are missing the point about what Nietzsche's saying when he's arguing with Darwin. He's saying there's no will to survive. That we just made that up. It sounds good, but nobody's thinking, I'm going to survive. I want to survive. That's not people throwing themselves out of airplanes. It's not the will to survive. And he calls it the will to power, but basically it could be generalized. It's the will to do that shit and feel empowered and have your joys and live life to the fullest. That happens to result in survival in some situations, but we can see in others it doesn't, because it's just like lust. The will to have lust is not really the will to reproduce. There's a difference there. So to say there's a will to survive, we all take it for granted. They were already taking it for granted back then. And he's pointing out, no, it's a will to thrive that results in survival. There's a relationship to survival. But animals, and including humans, are not going around thinking, I want to survive. No. They're thinking, I want more money. I want a power. I want a good job. They're thinking of prospering. And that's what he's talking about. All right. And I think also the will to power is misunderstood, much like people misunderstand Darwin's the fittest. People think of physically fit. It's obviously more like the way a round peg fits into a round hole. If you fit the peg well enough of the environment, then you survive. But even then, it's a little bit philosophically confusing to people, it would seem, because it doesn't mean you will survive. You could be physically fit and fit around and be the round peg for the round hole, and oop, lightning bolt, you didn't make it. Oop, asteroid, you have a great style of living there, too bad the environment changed overnight. The will to power is similar. It's not power domination, power of this, power of that. It's just like these word translation options that Gary's found out about, intelligence and mind and spirit. Well, power doesn't have as many synonymous translations, but it's still a word that has a concept with a lot of spectrum to what exactly it means. And he's talking, I believe, about, a feeling of being empowered. That you could do what you want to do and try things out you want to try and this sort of thing. And that, unfortunately, is related to a will to dominate others, which is really just a will to dominate one's own drives through dominating others. And this all seems to be more or less evident. Now, we talked about the negative experience of what I would call the idealized masochist, because I agree with you, actually, if we step back, that masochism, if we really want to understand it, there's a constant misery there. You're trying to feel pain and not misery, being the pain, and being able to endure the pain, and makes the misery seem more this or that or whatever. I don't want to talk about what that exactly is, but I agree there's a psychological explanation of that. So we could use an idealized one, and the point is, you did go with this idealized thing, and when you do that, certain kinds of pleasure can be pain for this person, pain can be pleasure for this person. And the point is, you keep saying, there's this objective thing of they'll be suffering and they're still away. It's not like they're happy all the time. Doesn't make life happy all the time. That's not the point. The point is that one thing for one person can be a joy and for another not a joy. The cat is screwing with the cat. Get out of there. Get out of here, cat. Great. You ruined it. Anyway, excuse me. So, this idealized masochist, the point shows, is just like any other thing. It's like, is it better to give 6 million Jews a piece of cake or to put them in a concentration camp? That's obvious. Well, it seems obvious there, but let's say there's a third option of giving them all a nice home and a place to live. And some of the Jews are diabetic. Well, I mean, then the cake is still better than the concentration camp, but you can't really say it's subjectively good. It's good in comparison. That's why you're always using comparisons, Gary, and I've been trying to tell you that's what relativism really is. That's what it is in science. I think that's what it ought to be in philosophy, is the fact that you notice that, oh wow, to make any of these clear statements I've ever made that were anything close to clear, I had to make a comparison. Oh, it's good relative. Comparison relating relative to another thing. Or it's bad relative to another thing. What if it's giving everybody a cake and none of them are diabetic? Keeping them in concentration camp or having them go sleep in the rain? Free, but sleeping in the rain. Is sleeping in the rain absolute good suddenly? Because it's absolutely better than being in a concentration camp. But that's where the word absolute becomes a bit of a stupid word, because it's not absolute when it's good relative. That's the opposite meaning of absolute. And you would like to use these extreme examples, which are comparisons, and just reiterate the need for relating things with relativism. And and then once you think you've established that, then you go into, and here's all the things we'd have to do. And if I get 51% of the people, I'm allowed to do the right thing because I can figure out the right thing because I figured it out. No. Just complain about the short comments. It's so bitchy of you. I mean, you interrupt. It's your whole style, so whatever. Now, you can, and then after that, you're like, well, how can you say there's no values? I'm not saying that. I'm saying Nietzsche doesn't say that. I certainly don't say that. Nobody that you take to be defending Nietzsche or whatever, just by talking about ideas that he sparks by the subjects he brings up, which he rarely makes a clear conclusion on. He brings up the subjects so we could discuss them. And then you go, well, Piero, what you said doesn't make sense. That doesn't prove there's no values. No, but we're not saying there's no values. We're saying every sentient creature has a matrix of values that is created around it, and it is the arbiter of them. They do exist. And you want there to be just one good set. We don't know if there's any good sets, but there's definitely more than one, because there's one per sentient creature. Okay, I already went over the 3-state example, where stop using your doubles. Put in 2. You're going to always find the middle case might not be as good as you thought, even if it was the good case. And if that doesn't work, then try to take your obviously good and obviously bad case, get a middle case. It'll probably be better than the obviously bad, but it's not objectively good. And this is the clue you need to figure out what we're trying to tell you about value systems. I mean, the idea is that you create your own value. You say you don't support that, but then you go on and on about sentient people created, and you think you can objectively figure it out. Well, that's the difference. We agree. Sentient creatures create this value system. They can't really be nihilist. They can't not have value systems. They get one built in from their, biological desires and needs and drives. And it seems like there's a lot of options. And no, I haven't seen yours be the one that automatically is concluded as better. From your point of view, some of those things are probably true from your point of view. Some of them are wrong, even from your point of view. You're not taking everything into account that you think or know. You want to pretend there's one. Well, even if it was true, it's never going to work out because everybody thinks they have the one and they couldn't all have it. But some of us just think, well, no, there's more than one. There's more than one. There's more than one way to be ethical. There's more than one set of rules that are making that you could be a decent person with. There's more than one. It's better analyzed that way because that's the situation we're in, and some of us think, you know what, and that's going to be the situation. Sure, we can eliminate a lot of things like fascism and slavery and things that we don't want to allow, and we can come up with all the reasons, and they're all perfectly valid. And there'll be more than one way to prove that Nazism is wrong in that case. So eating cake is not either good or bad. If you're diabetic, it's bad. If you're not, it could be good. If you don't like it, it's indifferent, and so on. It's not automatically good. It's automatically better than having your toenails pulled out, but those are those easy examples. It doesn't make it absolutely good or bad. You keep saying, oh, it's just either good or bad. No, it's always in comparison. Being in a concentration camp versus being in a different concentration camp. One could be better than the other. And they're both bad. You haven't noticed that. You haven't been able to resolve what that means for your philosophy, for philosophy in general. So this is the common thing. You guys want there to be one value. There isn't. We say so, and you say, oh, well, there must be none, because this is the only one you wanted. The one true one. Well, no, I'm sorry, there's infinite, and luckily there's patterns in the infinite ones. And it's not truth by consensus. It's not truth by consensus. I'm not willing to say it's absolutely wrong to steal for your children if they're starving. So the thing is, when you talk over and over about values related to sentient things, it's obvious that sentient things bring a value system into the world. Nietzsche agrees with you. You just think you have figured out what those values have to be and all of that, and you haven't demonstrated that. And some of us think that it's a bit more interesting of a situation. Two systems can solve the same problem. You can describe a parabola with Cartesian coordinates or radial coordinates. Which one's absolutely better? Well, some are easier and have simpler things. So by Occam's razor, in certain circumstances, one's better. In certain circumstances, another's better. But who's to say Occam's razor's better? It doesn't really matter, huh? We're using Occam's razor to save ourselves time. Is that better? Well, it saved me energy. So is that absolutely better? No. Sometimes people say, do it the long way. It's good for your character. Is that absolutely better? Is it absolutely worse? Stupid questions. You often say, yeah, those don't really matter. Well, but epistemology applies to them, because you say, oh, don't compare apples and oranges. Well, that's what a value system does. It's all apples and oranges. Do you like apples better or do you like oranges better? A person's individual values do make that judgment. They go, well, I like apples better. Oh, I like oranges better. That's what value systems do. They mix apples and oranges. That's why it's so complicated. That's why some of us say that there's going to be a weird, like, transcendental number kind of property. Oh, infinite digits forever, or something complex like that. Something akin to an inherent complexity in the fact that humans, some prefer apples, some prefer oranges. And somehow individual humans can figure that out, but we don't seem to have a rule system that can tell us exactly why that is. I'm really just trying to describe one person. The reality, rather, is that one person lives, and values in the real world. They're not all valid in the sense that if you were to say that any system's valid that doesn't contradict itself, which is the common relativistic approach to, well, how do we sort this out? Everything's not equal. You relate it to other systems and you use your values judgment. But how can you judge it in itself? You relate it to itself. Does it contradict itself? Does it cancel itself out? Because then without leaving the system, you can say, oh, it's not good. It contradicts itself. Now that works pretty good, but someone could say, no, contradictions are good. But I don't have to think contradictions are good, and this allows me to judge hypocritical systems as such by a purely relativistic system. Right? But if you find two systems that are different, they contradict. One says, hey, go to the left first. The other one says, hey, go to the right first. And they both get to the end. Which is better? I'm in an analysis system where why have to decide that? Which is better? My guess is probably both of them are flawed, and there's a third system that's better than both of them, and but they're worth using now, so we use them and we test them and we look for the third one. There is no need to say, oh, by the way, but I have an idea, I want to prove it's the one idea, so I will make this argument that there has to be one, and then I won't demonstrate that mine is the one, but since there is a one, it's a candidate. No. This logic just doesn't work like that in the real world. And you are a nuance evader. Okay, I'm not hiding in nuance. You are a nuance evader. 99% of our value judgments are apples versus oranges. Things that some people like, some people don't. Some people, turns out they like them but didn't know they should have tried it sooner, or they tried it and they didn't like it and then started. I mean, all these permutations you must know about. And you want to ignore that you could call it nuance, but it's just a complicated maelstrom. It's not nuance per se. It's 99% of the value judgments are unique and have an arbitrary whatever suits you nature to them. So value systems inherently mix apples and oranges. And it's like you say, consider being the masochist, and you could tell you wouldn't want to be one. Yeah, I judge it that way. That's comparing masochism to break down my own values to minimalist, put myself in that shoe, and see does it suit me. I'm comparing it really to my system or my minimal system reduced. So, and I see like you, okay, I don't want to live in that state. That doesn't mean I should just ignore the systems and ideas of someone that does decide to live in that state. If that state doesn't go away and there's people like that, I'm not going to ignore it. I'm going to take it into account. I'm going to actually look for a system that one of them can express, that's expressive, hopefully the most articulate one or whatever, that could actually state the system in a true enough way that I could go and get a handle on what's going on there. Whether to change them, or possibly when I find that system, it's like, oh, I guess some people are like that. But I think masochism is a problem, so I'm inclined to think, well, if I did find that out, we'd use that to help cure them of their masochism. It doesn't really matter whether it's proved that masochism is inappropriate or wrong. It just doesn't matter. I mean, my value system is such that I view a state of masochism as an unhealthy state. So I would work against that. There's no reason I can't respect someone else. That there's also a point where I'm going, really, am I getting into your business because I'm just trying to help you? And they're like, well, it's no help, leave me alone. And I might go, geez, well, that's a shame. I hate to see that going on in the world, but okay. And I'm saying that assuming that, no, they really probably do have a psychological thing to cure. But then you get into cake versus ice cream, chocolate versus vanilla, apples versus oranges, being out of the concentration camp in the mud, dying 3 days later, versus in the concentration camp for another 2 weeks and getting liberated by the Allies. There's a lot of complicated situations. A really good value system, a epistemological system has to address those. You can't just ignore those and go, but even if you are diabetic, you'd like to have cake better than be in a concentration camp. I'd rather have my toe hammered, my left toe hammered, and my right toe hammered. You could tell me, well, that's wrong. It just doesn't actually matter. No, it does, because I have a special pain in this one. Or I walk a certain way where I put more weight on this one. And you're going to go, well, that doesn't matter. That's a subtlety. It's an apple to an orange. I want to compare giving people cake to putting them in concentration camps. Never has been. The choice was leaving them in ghettos or putting them in concentration camps. Deal with that choice. That's a real one. That's one that really happened. So, and your premise of minimal sanity, I don't know what your faith in humans is. Who has this minimal sanity? But fuck that. You're never going to be able to define minimal sanity. It's just insane that for you to even think that you could base things on that. It's like, we have an absolute rule. First, define sanity. Then everybody that's sane follows the same rules. Yeah, only if you rig that sanity. Because you just don't get that its values are apples and oranges. And the question is, how do we have such a complex, almost mathematical system of values and processing values and turning situations as word problems into value problems and back and forth? How do we do that when it basically comes down to a lot of apple and oranges comparisons? That's the question that we are facing now. He's basically has a pessimistic thing that he was not advocating. He was not advocating this domination game, will of power. He advocated things like make good art and like Epicurus, express your inner spirit. But he happens to be pessimist like you. And he's saying, hey, it's a big domination struggle. You want to understand it? That's how you understand it. You want to have something else? Okay, we'll start by understanding that's what it is now, and the fact that if you want to make a peaceful world, then you have a particular drive that is peaceful. It's going to have to dominate. It's going to have to win the domination game to make a world with less domination. So you might as well admit there's going to be certain kinds of domination, and this is why I like the domination of good art, where art inspires people and shapes, might be a way to sort that out. On the other hand, he's kind of pessimistic. Maybe there isn't a way to sort it out. Maybe only the individual can navigate it, and it'll never be good overall. And you judging him and saying that he advocated that kind of world that he described, that he cynically recognized in the world, it's like you need to think in 150 years, should your philosophy be remembered. And people will be judging you based on what people that made videos about what you said. And they'll get the idea that you advocated consumption and reproduction. They'll say, in Menham said, the world was consumption, production, and reproduction. And someone will go, oh no, but that's not really, he was an advocate, he was just saying it sucks, and that's how we know it sucks. And they'll point out, no, he said it was natural. And then, my type will be going, well, he said it was natural, but he didn't mean natural in that sense of it's justified because it's natural. He was actually kind of saying it's not justified because natural stuff isn't automatically justified. And they'll go, no, that's bullshit. My professor told me. And Menham is famous for saying that it's just natural to consume. You might as well consume other creatures. You might as well be a cannibal even, because all eating is cannibalism. Yeah. They'll have no need to watch your videos because they'll already know what you think. Because they'll have heard it.